We know there's a second strike. Why didn't either one of those men say, we're going to look into this, something like that should never happen in an engagement by the United States military? Why?
Abby, I can't even understand any of this Venezuela thing. To me, it is absolutely cuckoo crazy. Look.
CNN panel erupts over Trump administration controversy. Political analyst Anna Navarro appeared on Abby Phillip's CNN program to discuss recent developments involving Donald Trump, Pete Hegseth, and Venezuela policy. The panel featured progressive commentator David Pakman alongside Republican strategists Todd and Batya Ungar-Sargon. The discussion became notably contentious as panelists debated from opposing viewpoints. We'll examine key moments from this exchange and provide analysis of the arguments presented. If you find this coverage valuable, please consider subscribing. We're approaching a significant channel milestone. Your engagement helps us continue delivering political analysis and commentary. Let's dive into the debate.
Tonight, there's more shifting than the sands at Mar-a-Lago. If you are trying to keep up with the Trump administration's deflections, denials, and distancing from a potential war crime, here is a short version for you. First, it didn't happen. Fine, it happened. But it was legal. So legal, in fact, that here's a turtle meme from a children's book. Oh, and the president didn't know. But if he had known, he wouldn't have approved.
Concerned, I didn't, I still haven't gotten a lot of information because I rely on Pete. Somebody asked me a question about the second strike. I didn't know about the second strike. I didn't know anything about people. I wasn't involved.
So, talk to Pete. Pete says he didn't order it. An admiral did. And then, after he bragged about watching the first strike, Pete now says he wasn't in the room for the second strike. Pete didn't see the survivors either. But whatever happened, whoever ordered it, all legal. And anyone who asks questions, well, you're an idiot in air conditioning.
I watched it live. We knew exactly who was in that boat. We knew exactly what they were doing, and we knew exactly who they represented. I watched that first strike live. As you can imagine, at the Department of War, we got a lot of things to do. So I didn't stick around for the hour and 2 hours, whatever, where all the sensitive site exploitation digitally occurs. So I moved on to my next meeting. I did not personally see survivors, but I stand, because the thing was on fire. It was exploded and fire and smoke. You can't see anything. You got digital. This is called the fog of war.
Margaret Donovan, a former JAG officer, joins us in our fifth seat. There's a lot of deflection going on there, just his body language as he talks about this. And then he uses the term fog of war as if that absolves you from responsibility, does it?
No, listen, it is September 2nd. This is the opening strike on a highly controversial air campaign that has never really been done before by the American military. And you have the Secretary of Defense saying that he didn't stick around for the whole strike. He had a meeting to go to, and he couldn't see the entire thing through. You were the Secretary of Defense. You can push the meeting, and you can stay for the strike, because lo and behold, conveniently, at the very moment that he walks out, apparently a war crime occurs. So everything that he just said there in those clips is fascinating. First of all, any, defense or other narrative that this boat was still operable is gone, because Secretary Hegseth just said it was on fire. And you have the President of the United States saying something that you would expect the President of the United States to say, which is that he's relying on his Secretary of Defense for this information. Well, guess what? Pete Hegseth doesn't have that information for you because he walked out of the room. And now there's a 4-star general with a highly respectable career in the special operations community who's going to be left holding the bag.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem like they really are throwing him under the bus. Let me just read what George Will, a conservative columnist, said about this whole thing. He says, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth seems to be a war criminal without a war, an interesting achievement. The killing of the survivors by this moral slum of an administration should nauseate Americans. A nation incapable of shame is dangerous, not least to itself. I would have expected, despite there's all this back and forth about who ordered it, who didn't. Let's put all that aside. They're in that room. They're asked about it. We know there's a second strike. Why didn't either one of those men say, we're going to look into this, something like that should never happen in an engagement by the United States military? Why?
Abby, I can't even understand any of this Venezuela thing. To me, it is absolutely cuckoo crazy. Look, Nicolás Maduro and Hugo Chavez before him are corrupt, sadistic, cruel, thieves, authoritarian, anti-American son of a bitch. And what Donald Trump is doing is attempting regime change. I will be incredibly happy, elated, if Nicolás Maduro goes away, I don't care which way. But the things that Donald Trump is claiming regarding Venezuela, that they are flooding the U.S. with drugs, that simply is not true. The fentanyl that is killing all of these Americans is coming through Mexico. The people that, the preferred route for drug dealers is through the Pacific and then through Central America, including the country of Honduras, where he just pardoned the former president that did flood American streets with cocaine that killed thousands and thousands of Americans. And then, he's claiming that Venezuela opened up prisons and insane asylums and released all these people into the United States. That actually did happen. It happened in 1980 in Cuba, and we all saw it happen. I was in Miami when the Mariel boat lift happened. There is zero evidence that that has happened in Venezuela. What happens? He wants to do regime change. He wants his Panama with Noriega. He wants his Grenada moment like Ronald Reagan did. But he can't say that it's regime change. One, because it's highly unpopular with the American people. And because, two, it would require the authorization of Congress.
Accountability questions emerge in Defense Secretary controversy. Abby Phillip noted that neither President Trump nor Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth have accepted responsibility for recent policy decisions, a pattern observers say reflects a departure from traditional executive accountability. This raises important questions that deserve more media scrutiny. Why did senators vote to confirm Hegseth despite widespread concerns about his qualifications? What due diligence was performed during the confirmation process? Political analysts across the spectrum have questioned Hegseth's preparedness for the role, particularly regarding his understanding of military protocols and international law, the chain of command during recent operations, the administration's shifting explanations of events, the broader policy debate. Beyond questions of individual competence, there's a larger discussion about military engagement policy. Critics argue that the American public hasn't been shown clear evidence justifying these operations. The legal distinctions between various military actions deserve closer examination. There's a pattern of operations that may warrant congressional oversight. What's missing from the coverage? Many believe mainstream media should press officials more directly, demanding senators explain their confirmation votes, asking for evidence supporting military operations, and examining whether current policies align with international law and American values. The Hegseth situation highlights fundamental questions about accountability in government, questions that extend beyond any single administration or official.
Operationally, right? We're not even on land yet, and we've already got a war crime, national embarrassment on our hands. We haven't even proceeded with the actual land operation.
And how much of the U.S. Navy arsenal is off the coast of Venezuela
absolutely,
right now?
for some kilos of cocaine?
Well,
give me a break.
Batya, I'd raised this yesterday. I think one of the big question marks here is this a pretext for regime change? And if it is, what is our level of engagement going to be in that? And should they be transparent about it? I think those are really important questions for Americans who care. If they're on those battleships in the Caribbean, if they are living, there are many Americans in the Caribbean who could be, in the area. As Trump has said, the airspace around Venezuela is closed. So don't we deserve answers on some of those things? Even on a basic level, don't we deserve answers about who these men were? If he knew exactly what they were and what they were doing, don't we deserve answers about that?
I definitely want to know if regime change is happening, and I will be very angry if it happens and I was not informed. So the answer to all those questions, I always want more information, but I feel like we're in the midst of another Russiagate hoax. There was a group of Democrats who said you can refuse illegal orders, and now they're out there in search of a war crime, and there absolutely isn't one. So what happened was the DOJ's Office of Legal Counsel issued a classified legal opinion authorizing these U.S. military strikes. At that point, the Department of, I guess I have to call it War, issued the directive that we were going to start hitting them. At that point, Admiral Bradley gave the order for the first strike. Pete Hegseth watched it. The boat caught fire. Now, in order to establish that a war crime happened, we have to know that the boat was completely destroyed. The military action, which was authorized by the DOJ, under Article 2 powers, which Trump has the legal right to issue, that boat was destroyed, was no longer a threat, and that there were 2 people clinging to it for life who are also no longer a threat. We do not know that yet.
You don't really need to know
what
that.
happened
I tend to disagree. I mean, we do have a JAG lawyer who has a lot of experience with military strikes.
Please tell me, what am I getting
I think it's a really
because if the boat was only disabled and not destroyed, it is still a legitimate military target.
Hold on. Here's the main issue: is it legal when if there are survivors clinging to whatever? Is it legal to then strike them again? And maybe we don't know the full answer to that question, but that is the central issue here.
Can I just?
That's the central issue.
The question is not actually that. The question is
the question is actually
because the whole thing hangs on whether the boat is still a military target or not.
The issue when it comes to
the
legality
on it when they hit it the first time.
The issue when it comes to the legality of the second strike, not the first one.
It's not whether there are people there.
It is
whether it's still a legitimate target.
No. It's what happens to survivors.
No, it's not.
We don't know. I think I'm going to acknowledge that there are things about this that we don't know. That we don't know where they were, what was the state of the boat, all that stuff. Sure, we don't know who gave the order, but I do think that is the central question, Margaret, that needs to be answered.
The question is not the existence of the survivors; it's whether the boat is still a legitimate military target.
Well, hold on a second.
I want Margaret to weigh in on
That's
this.
simply not true. Look, because you cannot shoot survivors of a shipwreck that are clinging on for dear life in the middle of the ocean.
You're using the word shipwreck to hide the distinction that I am
I'll use Secretary Hexeth's word.
Shipwreck is in the regs.
Yes, but I'm saying the whole point here is it still a legitimate target or not? If they can get on that debris and call for the rest of the narco terrorists to show up and save them, it is still a legitimate military target.
Okay, I'm going to defer to the expert here. Go ahead,
factually, this just doesn't pass the laugh test. You're talking about 2 people stranded in the middle of the ocean, and you think they're going to call for backup.
Can you please say, is that distinction between whether it is disabled or whether it is destroyed?
Can we back up a little bit? Because I just want to explain sort of how an airstrike is prosecuted, right? Because first you have a target in the first place. Yes. And the target could be an individual. The target could be a building. The target could be a boat.
Say something.
And so this is why we need, and we talked about this the other night, we need a full investigation. What was the target? Because I thought the target was the drugs. Those are gone if the boat's on fire. Maybe the target is these so-called terrorists.
The target was the boat, according to all of the reporting.
So I think we should wait for an investigation to see what the target actually was. If the target was a boat, then we're in this place where we are using military force to target boats. What?
Okay, you don't think that the initial military attack was legitimate.
Can I make one more point? Because this entire hypothetical,
it's not even about the second one, right?
Entire hypothetical that you're posing hinges on whether or not they could call somebody to be rescued. But if they're in a scenario where they need to call somebody to be rescued, they are shipwrecked. That is the definition of shipwrecked, and they cannot be targeted. That term, as Abby pointed out,
sorry, if the radio is still working on the boat, it is still a legitimate military target.
You cannot just concoct your own explanation for this.
I'm not concocting my own explanation.
I'm just saying,
is the law.
No, I'm saying that literally the law says that attacking shipwrecked individuals in the context of war is not allowed. That is literally what they use. That
shipwreck is no longer a legitimate target because it's no longer a threat.
Is in the document.
We're agreeing.
So I'm just saying
you are agreeing with me.
You are suggesting that if there's any scenario in which maybe they could have called somebody on land, they would have come by boat or helicopter or whatever to help them, then that would have justified attacking them again. I am pretty sure that, as Margaret is saying, and as virtually everybody is saying, that is not the case. I will agree with you on one thing. This requires investigation. We need more information. But the basics of
the Republican
situation
are such
that this would be
Roger Wicker says he'll ask it. Roger Wicker says he'll ask more questions.
This is the question.
Right.
Okay,
but I want to go back
pause. We have more. Okay, we have more ahead, Brad. So hold that thought.
And I'm not going to say anything.
Contrasting conservative perspectives on administration policy, the panel discussion highlighted a significant divide within conservative thought. Veteran Republican commentator George Will characterized the current administration's approach as problematic from a moral standpoint, focusing on broader policy concerns rather than tactical specifics. This represents a notable split in Republican commentary, with traditional conservatives taking different positions than newer party voices. Credentials and expertise in debate. The discussion became particularly pointed when panelists debated legal interpretations. Margaret Donovan, a former Army JAG officer, brought specific legal expertise to questions of military law and protocol. Her background offers insight into the technical aspects of these complex issues. The exchange demonstrates how political debates often involve tension between legal expertise, policy preferences, and political loyalties. Multiple viewpoints represented. The panel featured voices across the political spectrum, though some contributors had limited airtime. These discussions reveal how Americans are processing current events through different ideological frameworks. Your perspective matters. What's your take on these policy questions? How should media balance legal expertise with diverse political viewpoints? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching Insights Brief. Subscribe for more political analysis and commentary.